Welcome to the Unraveling the Scriptures channel. In the midst of the most epic battle ever narrated in the Bible, a legendary story emerges. An angel, clothed in heavenly power, single-handedly faces a massive army of 185,000 soldiers. Sent directly from the heavens, this divine messenger had a clear mission: to protect a kingdom on the brink of being overtaken by a devastating enemy. Today, I'm going to tell you all the details of this incredible story. So go ahead and like the video, subscribe to the channel, and stick around until the end. The angel who killed 185,000 soldiers in a single day. In the heart of the ancient kingdom of Judah, during a time when the heavens seemed to weigh heavily upon the earth, and the shadows of idolatry dimmed the faith of the people, a young king took the throne. Hezekiah, son of Ahaz, rose to power at just 25 years old. His reign, marked by spiritual and political challenges, would last nearly 3 decades, enough time to alter the course of sacred history, and perhaps even the destiny of an entire civilization. On the surface, Hezekiah might have seemed like just another biblical monarch trying to maintain control over a small kingdom constantly threatened by foreign powers. But when we look deeper, between the lines of ancient texts, at the decisions he made, the symbols he restored, and those he destroyed, a far more profound narrative begins to emerge, a story that involves faith, power, and a mysterious bronze serpent. Hezekiah's reign began during a time of deep crisis. Judah was submerged in spiritual decay. The worship of foreign gods had crept into even the most sacred corners of the kingdom. The temple in Jerusalem, once a symbol of the covenant between God and his people, had become a warehouse of idols and pagan practices. Hezekiah not only recognized the danger, he acted. With uncommon resolve and a faith that seemed drawn from some long-forgotten ancestral source, he summoned priests and Levites. He ordered a complete purification of the temple. Statues were destroyed, pagan altars burned, and the sacred halls once again echoed with songs of praise to the God of Israel. Passover was celebrated with a solemnity not seen for generations. Sacrifices were offered in abundance, and in that moment, faith was restored. But not everything was so simple. Among the many symbols and artifacts uncovered or remembered during this process of purification, one stood out to historians, especially to those who view the Bible not only as a sacred book, but as a codex of hidden secrets. It was the bronze serpent, also known as Nehushtan. This emblematic figure dates back to the days of the desert journey, when, according to the Book of Numbers, the people of Israel were struck by a plague of venomous snakes. Bitten, desperate, and on the brink of collapse, they cried out to Moses for help. Then came a divine and unusual command: create a bronze serpent, raise it on a pole, and instruct the afflicted to look upon it to be healed. For centuries, the serpent remained a sacred artifact. However, over time, the people began to make more of it than a symbol. They began to worship it, offering incense and reverence as if divine power resided in it. And so, Hezekiah, now established as Judah's reformer, made a bold decision. He destroyed the bronze serpent. He called it Nehushtan, a mere piece of worthless metal, and put an end to the cult that had grown around it. The worship of relics, after all, was not exclusive to the Hebrews. Civilizations around the world, from Egyptians to Hindus, from Romans to Mayans, raised monuments, revered artifacts, and created icons of worship that withstood the test of time. In all these cultures, we find objects believed to be portals between the earthly and the divine. But what sets Moses' serpent apart is that it was created, according to the texts, under direct instruction from God. It was not a pagan idol, but a divine tool for healing. And even so, it became the object of idolatry. Due to the excessive veneration of the bronze serpent, King Hezekiah took decisive measures, as described in 2 Kings 18:4. He ordered the removal of pagan altars, destroyed the images, broke the sacred pillars, and shattered the bronze serpent made by Moses. This was because, up to that point, the Israelites had been burning incense to it and calling it Nehushtan. Hezekiah chose to eliminate it, because it had become an object of idolatry, violating the principles of monotheism and the prohibition against idol worship, according to the law of Moses. His actions reflected a commitment to the purity of faith and the intention to keep worship focused solely on God, without interference from sacred images or objects. In addition to religious reforms, Hezekiah also promoted significant political changes. He led Judah through a period of resistance against the threat of the Assyrian Empire. The relationship between Hezekiah, king of Judah, and Sennacherib, king of Assyria, was marked by conflict and tension, documented both in the Bible and in historical records of the time. Sennacherib ruled Assyria from 705 to 681 BC, during which time the empire was consolidating its power as a dominant regional force involved in several military campaigns, including against Judah. The Assyrian army was known for its strength, discipline, and effectiveness, one of the most feared military forces of the ancient world. Concerned about the Assyrian advance, Hezekiah initially attempted a diplomatic approach, seeking to negotiate with Sennacherib to avoid direct confrontation. Both biblical accounts and historical inscriptions describe these negotiation efforts. As narrated in the Holy Scriptures, in the book of 2 Kings, King Hezekiah, ruler of Judah, initially sought to avoid a direct confrontation with the mighty Assyrian Empire. Fearing the military might of King Sennacherib, Hezekiah sent messengers with a peace proposal offering tribute in exchange for a promise of non-invasion. As a sign of submission, he delivered to Sennacherib a large amount, 300 talents of silver and 30 talents of gold, including treasures from the temple of the Lord and the royal palace. However, the attempt at appeasement was in vain. Even after receiving the tribute, Sennacherib was not satisfied. Demonstrating boundless ambition and disregard for his promises, the Assyrian king continued his military campaign, invading Judah and capturing several fortified cities. The situation became critical when the Assyrian army advanced toward Jerusalem, besieging the city and leaving the people with no route of escape or visible hope. Facing the imminent threat, Hezekiah sent a message to the enemy king, who was stationed in Lachish, acknowledging his failed attempt to avoid confrontation and pleading for mercy, willing to submit to any new demands. Still, the Assyrian aggression did not cease. To heighten the tension, Sennacherib sent an insolent letter to Hezekiah, mocking the God of Israel and proclaiming that no deity had ever been able to save any nation from Assyrian domination, thus insinuating that the God of Judah would also fail. Deeply shaken and distressed, Hezekiah took the letter and went to the temple of the Lord. There, in a symbolic act of mourning and desperation, he tore his clothes, a traditional custom among ancient Jews to express grief, repentance, or intense supplication, and spread the letter out before God in fervent prayer. Acknowledging human limitations in the face of such a threat, he sought refuge and guidance in divine sovereignty. In search of direction, Hezekiah sent messengers to the prophet Isaiah, one of God's greatest spokesmen of that time. Upon receiving the king's plea, Isaiah delivered a message of comfort and reassurance. Hezekiah was not to fear the arrogant words of Sennacherib's envoys, for the Lord had heard all the blasphemies directed against him and his people. Isaiah declared with prophetic authority that the king of Assyria would not conquer Jerusalem. On the contrary, he would return the way he came, defeated and humiliated. The prophet also reaffirmed God's promises to David and his descendants, assuring that Jerusalem would be spared, not because of human merit or political strategy, but out of love and faithfulness to the covenants established with the people of Israel. As proof of divine care and to strengthen Hezekiah's faith, Isaiah announced a miraculous sign. The shadow cast by the sun on Ahaz's sundial would go back 10 steps, a supernatural event according to the biblical account that indeed came to pass, confirming God's intervention and power. This narrative not only highlights the historical and political drama of the period, but also emphasizes profound spiritual themes, such as faith in the face of adversity, trust in divine sovereignty, and God's faithfulness to his promises. The story of Hezekiah remains to this day a powerful example of how sincere prayer, accompanied by a quest for God's will, can change the course of events, even against seemingly invincible enemies. Isaiah's prophetic message brought relief, encouragement, and renewed hope to the heart of King Hezekiah and all the people of Judah during one of the most critical and darkest moments in their history. In the midst of the Assyrian siege and the looming destruction of Jerusalem, God's word, spoken through Isaiah, was like a beacon in the darkness, pointing to the Lord's faithfulness and his commitment to his people. Moved by the divine promise and driven by unwavering faith, Hezekiah once again turned to the Lord in prayer, a sincere plea filled with trust. Prostrate before God, the king cried out for mercy, asking the Lord to hear his words and see the affliction of the people. More than seeking protection, he implored God to demonstrate his sovereign power before the nations, so that all the peoples of the earth would know that the Lord alone is God, unique, true, and worthy of all reverence. God's response did not delay. In 2 Kings 19:35, the Bible recounts in a direct and powerful way the supernatural intervention of God. That very night, the angel of the Lord was sent to the Assyrian camp and struck down 185,000 soldiers. At dawn, the survivors found themselves surrounded by a scene of death and devastation. The army that had once seemed invincible was destroyed without Jerusalem even having to lift a sword. The threat that loomed over the city was wiped out by a single act of divine will. Although the biblical text does not specify the exact means of this destruction, the episode is clearly presented as a direct judgment from God and unmistakable proof of his protection over Judah. More important than the technical details is the outcome. The most feared army of the time was defeated without a battle, showing that no human force can prevail against the power of the Most High. The impact was immense. The people of Jerusalem, filled with astonishment and relief, celebrated the salvation that came from the Lord. The city, which had been on the brink of destruction, now witnessed the faithfulness of God, who not only delivered his people, but also glorified his name among the nations. King Hezekiah himself, along with his leaders, expressed deep gratitude, acknowledging that the victory did not come through military strategies or political alliances, but through faith, prayer, and divine mercy. As for King Sennacherib, even after the humiliating defeat, he managed to escape with his life and return to Assyria. Historical sources and Assyrian inscriptions, such as those found on Sennacherib's prism, record the campaign against Judah, but curiously omit the conquest of Jerusalem, an omission that confirms the biblical account and underscores the impact of his failure. Sennacherib remained on the throne for some time, but his arrogance before God had consequences. Later, according to the biblical narrative, he was assassinated by his own sons while worshipping in the temple of his god Nisroch. This extraordinary episode remains to this day a powerful testimony of God's sovereignty, the value of sincere prayer, and the Lord's faithfulness to those who trust in him. The story of Hezekiah teaches that, even in the face of overwhelming forces, faith can move the hand of God, and when he acts, no opposition can stand. Sennacherib's death is not detailed in the Bible, but it is recorded in Assyrian historical sources. These records indicate that the king was assassinated in 681 BC under violent and mysterious circumstances. According to some inscriptions, his own son, Esarhaddon, conspired against him and carried out the assassination, possibly amid internal power struggles within the Assyrian court. The fall of the Assyrian army, once considered invincible, stands as a striking example of how human arrogance and overconfidence in military might can be overcome by divine forces. This story reinforces the idea that, even in seemingly impossible situations, God can intervene and change the course of events in favor of his people. It also reminds us of the importance of humility before the Lord. Meanwhile, Hezekiah remained faithful to the God of Israel and continued his religious reforms in Judah. He also invested in the security and strengthening of Jerusalem, ordering the construction of a new outer wall, known as the Siloam Wall, to reinforce the city's defenses against future threats. During his reign, Hezekiah also faced a severe illness that nearly cost him his life. As recorded in Isaiah chapter 38, the king once again turned to God, praying fervently and showing faith. In response, God heard his cry, healed him, and granted him 15 more years of life. Hezekiah died after a reign of approximately 29 years, around 686 BC. He was succeeded by his son Manasseh, who, unlike his father, adopted less devout practices and introduced idolatry in Judah, marking a period of departure from the religious principles promoted by Hezekiah. We hope you enjoyed this content. If you did, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and click on one of the videos that will appear next to continue following us. May God bless you, and see you soon.